Imagine this. You're at a dinner party. The conversation drifts to some headline everyone saw that morning. Most people nod along, repeating what the news said, satisfied with the surface of the story. But your mind doesn't stop there. It jumps ahead, connects dots, questions the assumptions. You see angles nobody else seems to notice. So you speak up. You share a thought that cuts deeper than the small talk. For a brief moment, you expect curiosity, maybe even an honest discussion. Instead, the room falls quiet. A few forced smiles. Someone clears their throat and changes the subject. And there you are left wondering why the truth, or even just a deeper question, can shut down a room faster than silence itself. If you've ever felt that sting, you're not alone. There's an unspoken cost to intelligence, one that few people ever talk about. The brighter your mind shines, the more shadows it seems to cast around you. The more clearly you see, the less people want to look. Why? Why does thinking deeply something we're told is valuable end up making you feel like an outsider? Why does society quietly turn away from its sharpest minds? Today, we're diving into the hidden psychology of intelligence. The reasons why deep thinkers are often rejected, ignored, or left standing on the edge of the crowd. And by the end, you'll see why this isn't just your experience. It's part of how the human mind has been wired for thousands of years. When you think more deeply than those around you, it doesn't just change what you notice, it changes how people respond to you. And here's the strange truth. The sharper your thoughts, the quieter the room becomes. Why does this happen? Why does clarity so often create distance instead of connection? Psychologists call it the mirror effect. When you share an insight, you're not just adding a new idea, you're holding up a mirror. And in that reflection, others suddenly see their own limits. For many, that's unbearable. Strength doesn't do this. Stand next to someone with bigger muscles, and you might admire them. Wealth doesn't do it either. You may envy a rich person, but their success doesn't shatter your self-image. But intelligence? That's different. Intelligence cuts deeper. It isn't something you carry, it defines you. Our thoughts, beliefs, and worldviews are not just things we have. They shape our very identity. So, when someone thinks faster, questions deeper, or sees more clearly, it doesn't feel like inspiration. It feels like a threat. History is full of reminders. Socrates was condemned for asking questions that made Athens uncomfortable. Galileo was silenced for showing the universe wasn't what the church claimed. Tesla imagined a future powered by free energy and died nearly forgotten then. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, the pattern is the same. The greatest minds were pushed aside, not because they lacked wisdom, but because they revealed truths others weren't ready to face. This is the hidden cost of intelligence. Not just loneliness, but the quiet resistance of a world that fears what it cannot yet accept. So why does intelligence trigger resistance in the first place? Why do sharper ideas often meet with silence, dismissal, or even hostility? The answer lies in the way the human mind protects itself. Psychologists describe it as a cognitive threat response. When someone challenges not just what we think, but how we think, the brain reacts as if it's under attack. And it isn't just metaphorical. Modern neuroscience shows that when people feel intellectually outmatched, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up. In other words, a clash of ideas can trigger the same circuits as facing a physical threat. Deep thinking doesn't just unsettle people. It sparks a primal survival response. Why would evolution wire us this way? Because for most of human history, survival didn't depend on being the cleverest person in the tribe. It depended on belonging to the tribe. Fitting in meant safety. Being cast out meant danger, predators, hunger, or isolation. This is why the brain values social acceptance over intellectual challenge. When someone introduces an idea that questions the group's beliefs, the mind often reacts defensively, as though protecting its very life. It isn't about logic, it's about survival. You can see this in everyday life. Bring up a thought that goes against common opinion at a group gathering, and watch how quickly the subject shifts. Not because you were wrong, but because the group felt unstable. In private, one-on-one, people may be a bit more open. But in groups, the pressure to conform is far stronger. This is why history's deep thinkers were so often rejected. Their ideas weren't just disruptive. They threatened the delicate balance of belonging. And even today, the same psychology plays out whether in classrooms, workplaces, or even family conversations around the dinner table. If the brain is wired to defend itself from uncomfortable truths, what does that defense look like in daily life? Psychologists have identified several mental habits biases that explain why intelligence so often collides with resistance, named the Dunning-Kruger effect. This one is both fascinating and frustrating. People with little knowledge often believe they know a lot, while those who are truly intelligent are filled with doubt. The less someone understands, the more confident they sound. And in social settings, confidence is often valued more than truth. That's why the loudest voice in the room isn't always the wisest one. Human brain loves the familiar. Old beliefs, even if flawed, feel safer than new ones. Present someone with an idea that shakes tradition, and their instinct isn't to explore, it's to retreat back into what's comfortable. It's why societies cling to outdated systems, even when change would clearly help. The backfire effect. This is one of the strangest quirks of human psychology. When people are confronted with facts that contradict their beliefs, they don't always reconsider, they often dig in even deeper. It's as if the challenge to their worldview strengthens their grip on it. For a deep thinker, this feels maddening. The more evidence you offer, the more resistance you meet. You've probably seen these play out. You try to explain a complex idea, and someone dismisses it with surface-level confidence. Or you question a rule at work or in school, and people defend it just because that's how it's always been. Or worse, when you bring up facts, only to watch someone double down harder on the very thing the evidence disproves. This is not a flaw in you. It's a reflection of how the human mind shields itself. The tragedy is that these mental shortcuts, designed to protect people from discomfort, also protect ignorance, outdated beliefs, and fragile egos. And in the digital age, these defenses aren't just alive, they're amplified. In the past, rejection came face-to-face in classrooms, in courts, in public squares. Today, it happens on screens. And in many ways, the digital age has made the struggle of deep thinkers even harder. Why? Because online, attention isn't given to what's true. It's given to what spreads. Algorithms reward one thing above all else: engagement. The content that thrives is the content that hooks fast, sparks emotion, or stirs outrage. And depth rarely does any of those things. Look at the most viral posts you see. They're short, catchy, emotional. A joke, a hot take, a dramatic clip. Meanwhile, a thoughtful explanation, something that might take 2 minutes to absorb, gets buried. Not because it lacks value, but because it doesn't compete in a system built for speed. This creates a strange new hierarchy. The loud, the flashy, the simplistic rise to the top, while the careful and the complex sink into the noise. It's why motivational sound bites go viral, while nuanced arguments disappear into the algorithm's shadows. And the bias doesn't stop there. Online spaces encourage echo chambers, places where people mostly see ideas they already agree with. At first it feels comforting, but it also makes people even less open to new perspectives. When a deep thinker shows up in that space, offering a different view, they aren't welcomed, they're attacked, mocked, or ignored. Consider the irony. The internet was meant to connect us, to spread knowledge. Instead, it often amplifies division and makes the rejection of intelligence more aggressive than ever. For a deep thinker, this can feel crushing. You're not only misunderstood in person, you're drowned out online. And instead of meaningful dialogue, you're met with quick dismissals, angry comments, or silence from an algorithm that never noticed you were there. This is the digital age's twist on an old story. Society still resists intelligence, but now it does so at the speed of a scroll. And if you've ever felt this misunderstood, overlooked, drowned out, you're not alone. That's why I make videos like this, to give deep thinkers a place where their voice isn't dismissed. If this resonates, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next chapter in this conversation. In the early 1800s, Europe was swept with optimism. The Enlightenment had promised reason and progress, and many philosophers of the time spoke of human perfectibility, the belief that society would keep advancing towards something brighter. But Arthur Schopenhauer stood apart. Born in 1788 in Germany, his life was marked early by loss and distance. His father died when he was still young. His relationship with his mother was cold, often hostile. While others around him celebrated progress and hope, Schopenhauer looked at the world and saw suffering, conflict, and illusions that people clung to just to get through the day. By the time he began writing, he had no interest in comforting lies. Where others praised reason and optimism, he argued that human life was driven by blind forces, restless desires that could never be fully satisfied. And he believed intelligence only sharpened this awareness. The more clearly you saw, the harder it became to hide behind simple pleasures. For Schopenhauer, intelligence was not a gift but a curse. The smarter a person was, the more likely they were to feel isolated, alienated from the ordinary rhythms of life. At the heart of his philosophy was a sharp contrast. Most people, he said, live by the will to live, a drive to chase pleasure, safety, and survival. But the most intelligent are often gripped by something different. The will to truth, a hunger to understand reality, even if it brings pain. And history shows what happens to those who pursue that truth too openly. Socrates was condemned to death for asking questions Athens didn't want answered. Galileo was threatened with prison for saying the earth moved around the sun. Giordano Bruno was executed for suggesting infinite worlds. Time and again, the world punished those who revealed what it wasn't ready to face. Schopenhauer saw this as proof of his view. The thinker isn't rejected for being wrong, but for being right too soon. Their very clarity disturbs the comfort of the crowd. That's why he wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." The more you see, the harder it is to pretend. The more you understand, the harder it is to stay satisfied with what once seemed enough. His own life reflected this truth. In his youth, he lectured in the same city as his rival, the optimistic philosopher Hegel. Hegel drew packed halls. Schopenhauer often spoke to nearly empty rooms. For decades, he was ignored, dismissed as too dark, too bleak. Only later, when he was an old man living in Frankfurt, did the world begin to notice him. His works were finally quoted, praised, even celebrated. But by then he was withdrawn, bitter and solitary, sharing his final years with little more than his beloved dog. The recognition came, but far too late to undo the years of neglect. And that is the cruel irony. Schopenhauer lived long enough to see his name honored, but not long enough to enjoy belonging. His life became the proof of his own philosophy, that intelligence is not a path to happiness, but a path to solitude. This is the curse, to see life as it truly is, not as it pretends to be. If intelligence carries such a heavy cost, what can deep thinkers do? Are they doomed to walk through life misunderstood, isolated, and silenced? Not at all. Schopenhauer himself, despite his pessimism, offered ways to endure the weight of clarity. And modern psychology adds even more to the picture. The truth is this: you may not be able to change how society reacts, but you can choose how you live with it. Here are 4 ways that philosophers, psychologists, and thinkers across history have found to carry the burden of intelligence without being crushed by it. 1. Embrace solitude as strength. Most people see being alone as a punishment. But for a thinker, solitude can be a sanctuary. It's in quiet hours that you can read, reflect, and create without compromise. Nietzsche once said that the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Alone time isn't a failure, it's fuel. 2. Seek out the right company, not the most company. You don't need a crowd to feel understood, you just need the right few. History's greatest minds often found their deepest friendships in books, letters, or small circles of like-minded souls. In today's world, that might mean a forum, a study group, or even one close friend who values depth. 10 shallow conversations can never equal one genuine one. 3. Share your thoughts wisely. Not every audience is ready for every idea. You don't need to throw your deepest truths into every casual conversation. Instead, learn to read the room. Sometimes the wiser path is to observe, to wait, and to share only when ears are open. Your words have weight. Use them when they will be received. 4. Simplify without dumbing down. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Deep thinkers often lose people, not because their ideas lack value, but because they're delivered in ways others can't digest. Learning to communicate clearly without losing the depth bridges the gap between insight and understanding. The truth is, being a deep thinker in a shallow world will never be easy. But it doesn't have to mean a life of exile. It can mean a life of sharper vision, chosen company, and the quiet freedom to live honestly in a world that often prefers illusion. So, where does all of this leave us? If society resists intelligence, if history shows us exile, rejection, and loneliness, what is the point of thinking deeply at all? Here's the twist. Deep thinkers may feel isolated in their time, but history bends around their vision. The very truths that once caused their rejection often become the foundations of tomorrow. Think about it. Socrates' questions shaped philosophy. Galileo's telescope reshaped science. Tesla's inventions power our world. Turing's mind helped end a world war and gave birth to modern computing. Even Van Gogh, who died in poverty, now colors the walls of museums across the globe. The pattern is clear. Society does not fear intelligence itself, it fears what intelligence reveals. But in the end, those revelations become the very stepping stones of progress. And this is where your story matters. If you've ever felt silenced for speaking your mind, ignored for asking harder questions, or pushed aside for seeing patterns others missed, understand this. You are part of the same lineage. The loneliness you feel today is the echo of a struggle shared by the greatest minds in history. Schopenhauer once said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." And that's the heart of it. Deep thinkers see what others can't or won't see. That sight will always make some people uncomfortable. But it also means you carry a vision the world may one day depend on. So no, deep thinkers are not doomed to isolation. They are destined for legacy. You may not be celebrated now, but your clarity, your questions, your hunger for truth, it matters. Not because it wins approval in the moment, but because it plants seeds for the future. If you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are simply seeing the world as it really is. And perhaps one day, the very truths that cost you comfort will be the ones that give future generations theirs. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking too deeply? Share your story below. Your experience might be exactly what another deep thinker needs to hear today. Let's turn this comment section into a place where depth is finally welcome. And when you're ready to go further, I've prepared a playlist that explores the power of silence, how Machiavelli wielded it as a weapon, and how Carl Jung saw it as a path to healing. You'll find it linked right here. It's the perfect next step if you want to keep walking this path with me.